I'd ask members to take their seats. Mr. McLaren has moved second reader. Oops. Mr. McLaren has moved second reading of Bill 32, an act to repeal the Niagara Escarpment Planning and Development Act and to make a related amendment to the Ministry of Natural Resources Act. All those in favour, please rise and remain standing.
Mr. McLaren.
Mr. McLaren.
All those opposed, please rise and remain standing.
Mr. Bradley.
Mr. Bradley.
Mr. Hoskins.
Mr. Hoskins.
Mr. Duguid.
Mr. Duguid.
Ms. McCharles.
Ms. McCharles.
Mr. Quinter.
Mr. Quinter.
Mr. Berardinetti.
Mr. Berardinetti.
Mr. Dillon.
Mr. Dillon.
Mr. Quadri.
Mr. Quadri.
Mr. Murray.
Mr. Murray.
Mr. Moridi.
Mr. Moridi.
Mr. Couteau.
Mr. Couteau.
Mr. Zimmer.
Mr. Zimmer.
Mr. Delaney.
Mr. Delaney.
Mr. Dixon.
Mr. Dixon.
Mrs. Mangat.
Mrs. Mangat.
Ms. Wong.
Ms. Wong.
Mr. Sergio.
Mr. Sergio.
Ms. Jassic.
Ms. Jassic.
Mr. Baker.
Mr. Baker.
Mr. Ballard.
Mr. Ballard.
Miss Molly.
Ms. Molly.
Mrs. Martins.
Mrs. Martins.
Mrs. McMahon.
Ms. McMahon.
Mr. Milchin.
Mr. Milchin.
Mr. Naidu Harris.
Ms. Nadu Harris.
Mr. Potts.
Mr. Potts.
Mr. Arnott.
Mr. Arnott.
Mr. Hudak.
Mr. Hudak.
Monsieur Bisson.
Mr. Bisson.
Ms. DeNovo.
Ms. DeNovo.
Mr. Miller, Hamilton East Stony Creek.
Mr. Miller, Hamilton East Stony Creek.
Ms. Armstrong.
Ms. Armstrong.
Ms. Jones.
Ms. Jones.
Mrs. Monroe.
Mrs. Monroe.
Ms. Scott.
Ms. Scott.
Mr. Walker.
Mr. Walker.
Mrs. Marteau.
Ms. Marteau.
Mr. Hatfield.
Mr. Hatfield.
Ms. Campbell.
Ms. Campbell.
Mr. Gates.
Mr. Gates. The ayes are 1, the nays are 40.
The ayes being 1, nays being 40, I declare the motion lost.